In 1989, Pepsi, yes, the soda company, briefly became the 6th largest military power in the world. And no, I'm not joking. Pepsi actually owned 17 submarines, a destroyer, a cruiser, and a frigate, all acquired from the Soviet Union. Think about it. For a brief moment, a cola company had more warships than most nations' navies. How the hell did this happen? How does a company that sells fizzy sugar water end up with a military fleet? Well, buckle up. This story involves Cold War politics, vodka deals, and the weirdest business transaction in history. To understand this madness, we need to rewind to 1959. The Cold War, nuclear threats, USA versus USSR, all that fun stuff. That year, Vice President Richard Nixon traveled to Moscow for a trade fair, and that's where he met Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev. Now picture this. Nixon and Khrushchev standing in a model American kitchen, arguing about capitalism versus communism, and then a Pepsi executive slides in like a smooth salesman. That exec was Donald Kendall, and he had one mission: get a Pepsi into Khrushchev's hand, and he did so successfully. See, Khrushchev took a sip of Pepsi, and he absolutely loved it. I mean, of course he loved it. He wasn't allowed to have it before. It's like telling a kid they can't have candy. The moment they get some, they're obsessed. But that moment set everything in motion. By 1972, Pepsi became the first American product legally sold in the USSR, all thanks to Kendall's clever negotiations with Soviet Trade Minister Nikolai Stolichnaya. But there was one huge problem. The Soviet ruble was worthless outside of the USSR. So how did the Soviets pay for their Pepsi addiction? They bartered vodka. Yep, they swapped Stolichnaya vodka for Pepsi syrup, about 1 million cases a year. So for every Soviet drinking a Pepsi, an American somewhere was down in a shot of Stoli. Capitalism and communism reduced to a booze for soda swap. Incredible stuff. And this deal lasted for 17 years. And everything was great until it wasn't. By the late 1980s, things got a bit complicated. A US boycott on Soviet vodka after their invasion of Afghanistan left Pepsi drowned in surplus vodka that it just couldn't sell. By 1989, Pepsi's vodka trade wasn't working anymore. Soviets were drinking more Pepsi than vodka, and Americans weren't buying enough Stoli. So the USSR had to renegotiate, and instead of cash, they made a bizarre offer. We give you warships, you give Pepsi. Yeah, the Soviet Union literally traded Pepsi and Navy. 17 submarines, 3 warships, which included a frigate, a cruiser, and a destroyer, all in exchange for Pepsi syrup. Soviet officials like trade negotiator Anatoly Belichenko proudly helped seal the deal. I imagine Pepsi execs during the negotiations or discussions were like, what? But nevertheless, they agreed. They agreed on the deal. And for a brief, glorious moment, Pepsi was militarily stronger than most countries. But of course, that's not all the story is about. What did Pepsi actually do with the Navy? Well, first of all, these machines were old, decommissioned ships. And Pepsi took one look and said, yeah, nah. They sold them to a Swedish scrap company almost immediately for about $3 million. So no, Pepsi didn't start invading islands. The world was not about to see the great Cola Wars of 1990. But here's the kicker. Right after the deal, Pepsi CEO Donald Kendall told the White House in cheeky fashion, "We are disarming the Soviet Union faster than you are." Pepsi, ladies and gentlemen, disarming communism one soda at a time. So what's the lesson from this insane story? 1. Pepsi had a navy. That's ridiculous and that's just hilarious. 2. Bartering military assets for soda is peak Cold War absurdity. And 3, corporations today, the Amazons, the Teslas, etc., they don't need warships. They have far more power than that. So Coca-Cola may have won the Cola Wars, but Pepsi can say at least we had a navy. Alright, so if you enjoyed watching this video, you enjoyed this wild story, hit the like button, subscribe, drop a comment. If Pepsi actually did follow up with the Navy, the Pepsi Navy, would you have enlisted back then or even right now? Let me know in the comments. Thank you all for watching.